Um, just shall we pin Samina and spot? Okay, we shall begin then. Namaskar and a heartfelt welcome to this special talk in the ACLiSA speaker series, Author Talks. We are commemorating today, albeit a week late, the 78th anniversary of the partition of the Indian subcontinent into the nation states of India, Pakistan, and East Pakistan, now known as Bangladesh. The repercussions of and the division politics which led to this partition is something we are continuing to feel to this day, especially with the increasing anti-Bengali sentiments that is permeating India currently. There are many in the audience today whose families have been victims of the partition on either sides of the border in the Punjab and in Bengal. And this is a profoundly personal memory for these nations and its peoples. Independence from colonial rule was gained with the immeasurable cost of the partition and the blood, pain, and trauma that has bled into the nations subsequently formed. Today, in this current political milieu, we remember where our stories and histories have come from. So, having said this, before I introduce our speaker today, who we are very privileged and honored to have with us, I will quickly go through the housekeeping for this meet. This talk will be 40 minutes long with a Q&A for 20 minutes at the end. Please keep your audio and video muted for the duration of the talk. You may type in any questions and comments in the chat in the meantime, and we will address them at the end of the talk. Please refrain from using any offensive language. The live caption will be enabled. If anyone wishes to disable or enable it personally, you may do so, but on our end, we will keep it enabled. The talk and the Q&A will be recorded, so please keep your video off if you do not wish to be recorded. The video will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and the link will be sent to those who have registered. Like I said earlier, we are very honored and very privileged to have Samina Mishra with us today. I'm sure she needs no introductions, but nevertheless, Samina Mishra is a documentary filmmaker, writer, and teacher based in New Delhi. Her work uses the lens of childhood, identity, and education to reflect the experiences of growing up in India. Her recent work includes the books Roop and the River Crossing, which I really hope you have all got a copy of, and Where Does It Hurt? The Hum Hindustani Project poetry podcast on children and citizenship, and The Incredible Child, an arts-based program for Afghan refugee children at the Simar Center, Delhi. Her other works for children include the genre-defining Jamlo Walks and Lida Finds a Way. Samina founded the Magic Key Center for Arts and Childhood that works on intersections between childhood, the arts, and education. And she hopes that her works make children think about the world they want to live in and encourages adults to support children in realizing that world. Samina Mishra, welcome to ACLiSA. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ritvika. I feel privileged to have been asked to do this talk. August is definitely a month of remembering good things and bad. And I'm happy to be a small part of the ways in which y'all are remembering this. So I have a little slide presentation, which I'm going to try and share now so that there's something for y'all to see other than my face. There we go. Yeah, it works? Okay. So because August is a month of remembering, a couple of weeks ago, I was at the Partition Museum, and okay, for some reason, I can't change the slide.
It was working well, and we did a round.
Yeah. See, I told you this is what happens. For some reason, I was not being able to change the slides.
Yes, sometimes it gets stuck while you are presenting, and
I think maybe on the share mode. Maybe I won't turn it into a full screen slide share. See if it still works. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it good enough?
Yeah. Works.
Yeah. So I was at the Partition Museum with this particular book and talking to children who had been sort of born like probably in the 2010s. And, we started the conversation thinking about like whether it would be something that they know anything really about. And of course, they are from North India, and I'm sure that plays a part in this. But despite that kind of temporal distance that they have from the partition, everybody there had heard stories about it, And so we shared stories. I was in conversation with Parvati Sharma. She had a story about her great grandfather. I had a story about my great grandfather. And the children and teachers present there all also had some stories. And we thought about how whose stories do we remember and whose stories become history? And why is it that we should remember? So before I go into why I wrote the book and how I wrote the book in the process, I thought to think a little bit about this question, why we should remember. I would share with you an anecdote from one of my workshops related to the Hindustani project. Actually, in this working class settlement in Delhi called Trilokpuri, which is it's a mixed population. But in this particular workshop, there were quite a few Muslim children, both boys and girls. And in one of the sessions, one of the things that we were talking about is, a sense of belonging and when one feels it and when one doesn't feel it. And there were some stories that came up from the Muslim children. So some of the Muslim boys said that we don't feel a sense of belonging. We feel a sense of inequality when the teacher tells us, oh, you Muslim boys, you go and sit at the back of the class. Some of the girls said that they go to school with a headscarf, and the teachers, when they enter, they say that take this off, this is not your home. But they asked me, they said, but they don't say anything to the girls who are wearing the kada, Sikh girls who are wearing the kada. And that, so they feel treated differently. And so clearly we are living in times, as Ritvika's introduction also referred to, of what is going on in this country. We are living in times where we're not at all certain of what it means to live together. We still don't know that. And we are still struggling to define what being Indian, I think, really means. I think that the origins of this book, in a way, lie in some of this idea that children are meant to study historical events, but in this kind of distant and abstracted way, like the teachers who are in that government school that these children go to, who are kind of trying to obviously enforce this idea, a singular idea of Indianness. But this question, I think some really important questions are not being asked. For example, the question that how is it that grown-ups choose the actions that they choose? And so this book, I think, came out of something like that, to try to understand this extremely important part of our history that continues to live in the present. I didn't think of writing this book. I didn't think of writing on partition because it is such a huge thing. And I also, I never thought of it, I think, because I don't have a direct connection. Yes, I have a story about my great grandfather during partition, but, I never really felt like personally connected to it. So, like what was my kind of positionality and my location for writing something like this? So it never really occurred to me. It has crept into work that I've done because I have worked on in spaces and with people for whom this has been important. So it has been part of my work in those ways, but never something that I directly wanted to write or think about. And this actually came to me when my editor, Simran Kaur from Penguin, she reached out and she said that we don't have very much literature. Like we have a few books, but there's not a lot for children, for younger children particularly. And would I be interested in doing something about it? And so it was like, I thought, this is a tough one. But I think it was the challenge of it. Like, how would I do this? And how would I do it for slightly younger children, like not teenagers, but slightly younger? How does one talk about this really complicated and difficult event? So I think it was a challenge that interested me. So I thought, let me give it a try. And then we spoke a little bit about what it could be about. And the idea of there being a toy, that was something that we spoke about. But what was that toy to be? I definitely didn't. I mean, I wanted the story to be that of a little girl. And I definitely didn't want the toy to be a doll for obvious reasons. And so I was thinking, and, the thing about ideas is that, like, when they come and how they come, it's very hard to actually pinpoint, like, that particular thing. Like, where do ideas come from? There's, I think, a kind of a fertile ground that one can work towards ideas emerging from. So that comes out of, reading, watching, engaging with people, all those many things that are kind of like tilling the soil for ideas to come from. But one doesn't really know exactly what is the seed and how it comes. And so this idea of the kaleidoscope, which is central in the book, in Roop and the River Crossing, I cannot tell you, where it came from. So yeah, there was a kind of fertile ground, I guess, from, things that I've kind of done before, that I have played with kaleidoscopes and, they have interested me to some small extent. But once the idea came, I can tell you why I held on to it. Yeah. And obviously, I held on to it because of this idea of like the actual material fragmentation that happens in the kaleidoscope, and the metaphorical and also the physical fragmentation that happened during partition. And the fact of, the big idea of fragmentation and how it kind of impacts the little everyday lives. And so when the idea of the kaleidoscope came, those are the reasons that I held on to it for. And it felt like a strong metaphor, but also something that would allow that character to play with in everyday ways, and perhaps open up a way of looking at the world through that. Because I think children do that. The things that children do in their everyday contribute also to the way that they understand the world around them. And so that is why I kind of held on to the kaleidoscope. And I thought that at this point, it might be nice for me to read a little excerpt from the book that can sort of show you what it was that I was thinking of with the kaleidoscope and this idea of the fragmentation inside and the fragmentation outside. Yeah. So I'm going to read you actually two small bits, which use the kaleidoscope in this way. So this is from the beginning. Red, blue, green, purple. It was as if the world had split. The pieces were held together by red, blue, green, purple. They changed in shape as Roop twirled the kaleidoscope. 1 second circles linked together, the next second triangles. Roop, Roop, come for lunch. The fragments of the world fell together in a colorful jumble as Roop ran downstairs from the chat. Jaggi Chacha brought Roop the best gifts every year from the Mela at Sheikhupura. This year, he also brought news that Papaji and he were arguing about. Roop heard words like Batwara and Amritsar. A voice spilled out from the radio. Today, I am speaking to you on another historic occasion when a vital change affecting the future of India is proposed. From outside came the sound of a loudspeaker in the bazaar. Har, 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 iko kar rab. Sun Jaggi, Papaji said, pointing towards where the sound came from. Ikko, people here want to be one. No one wants trouble. Praji, if it's happening there, it will happen this side too. It's just a matter of time. Thali split up with triangles. Thali split up with circles, chanted Roop in her head as the kaleidoscope turned. The circles turned into red and green triangles. There was a Maulvi in the bazaar at Sheikhupura who had arrived from Agra on one of those trains, said Jaggi Chacha. He managed to survive only by pretending he was dead. Dehshat, he called it, complete terror. Baby grabbed the kaleidoscope from Roop's hands. Not while you eat, she said. And then I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and read. So there's a bit where she goes to school and there's some stuff with her friends, and then school shuts down because the trouble is growing. So this is a bit from when she's at home because school is shut. It had been a week. I have a little, yeah, you can look at that. It had been a week of closed doors, shuttered windows, and no school. A week of confusing bits of overheard conversations, like the fragments inside Roop's kaleidoscope. Red, blue, green, purple. For generations, we have dreamt and struggled for a free and independent united India. Muhajirs are walking to the border. A train arrived at Lahore with no one left alive in it. Mariam is refusing to leave Agra because her parents are buried there. Harpreet Chacha's family have all crossed over. The only alternative to coercion is partition. The house was silent. Bebe had put Nikka down for a nap, and even the gully outside seemed to have gone to sleep. No hawkers calling out their wares, not even the sound of a cycle bell. Roop could only play the game of splitting up the world with her new toy. She trained the kaleidoscope at the forbidding front door. One became many. India, Pakistan, partition, home. She turned the tube and the colored glass shook. Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Isai. She brought the kaleidoscope down and stared at the door. The door was a border, as if the world had split. Muhajir, trains, bandages, blood. The game was not fun anymore, Roop realized. Bebe was kneading atta in the kitchen. Roop noticed the worry lines on her forehead, in the corner of her eyes, in the way her jaws tightened. Roop had asked Bebe about the Muhajirs. Bebe had called them refugees who were unfortunate and had no choice but to leave their homes. When Roop asked, "Will we leave too, or will we stay, like Noor and Preet's families?" Bebe just told her to pray for the troubles to end. Roop lay down on her bed, holding on to the kaleidoscope. Red, blue, green, purple. Split up with triangles, split up with circles. She looked towards the shut window. Getting answers from grown-ups was never easy. So we can talk afterwards also about this, but this was, in a way, the way that I think the kaleidoscope worked for me, to be able to see how what is going on in the outside is and how it is affecting the child. And this idea of, so many voices and those fragmented small snippets of conversations, and yet nobody really explaining things to a child, which, is it continues to happen, of course. It's not just about partition, but also about our everyday. And so I think for me, one of the things that was important in writing this book is something that is a kind of running thread in all my work, and which is about the voices of children and their lived experiences and how we can make place for them. So what I'm imagining of Roop actually comes from having thought and worked about this in different contexts. And because one of my projects has been about citizenship and working with children to understand how they experience the ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity, I thought I'll move away from the book a little bit to talk to you about this idea of children's voices and how it's important that we make place for them, which is what I'm hoping that the book also does. So what you see on the slide right now is from the research project. Hindustani began as a kind of research project, and then it became a podcast. And this year I'm doing some outreach with it. So you can see these images are from the art workshops that I did in 3 places with children in Shaheen Bagh, Okhla in Delhi, in a library in Govandi, Mumbai, and also in Punjab with children who had come to Delhi or in the village, on the highways during the farmers' protests. The quote in the center is from a 14-year-old girl in Kitab Mahal, this library in Govandi. And when we were talking, so I did the workshops with them, which were about writing and art, but I also spoke to some of the children and did these conversations, which I recorded. This was one of the girls that I spoke to. And when we started and I spoke to her about, like what is citizenship, what are rights, things like that, she said to me, I have no rights in the country, but others should. And so to me, this is a very powerful thing that for children, this feeling, because children are always, in a sense, marginalized in the way that marginalized groups are not heard. Children too are rarely heard. And so, things like, in these images, there are ideas that they've put down about, when they feel it is not as if the home or the school is always a space where they feel free. There are examples where they've spoken about how they are free to read a book in school, but they are not free to talk. Some children have talked about how they are free at home to do many things, watch TV, things like that, but they are not free to do masti, because these are children who are living in extremely constrained circumstances. Um, and this artwork of the balloons, this is a girl from Shaheen Bagh, and she wrote about I don't know if you can see it since we are not on full screen, but it says, "I want freedom to burst like a balloon when friends say racist things." And in her interview, she spoke about why she had done this, and it was about uh, she's a girl studying in a kind of a private school, and in English medium private school. And they see the area that she comes from in a certain way. And so she's grown up being looked at in a certain way. And then, of course, the protests against the CAA started, and Shaheen Bagh suddenly came into the limelight. And so she faced a lot of bullying. And she felt unable even to go and speak to the teachers. And she also felt a little bit unable to speak at home because she didn't want to worry them. And so the workshop actually became a space where she, for the first time, she was able to speak about that. And so these voices, I feel, they're actually pointing towards something which is not just about children, but it is actually about the world that we are creating and the world that we are living in as people, both children and adults. And I think that for me, it is this, that to be able to listen to these voices of children allows for a way of understanding the larger structural questions. So I thought what I'd do is I would share with you a little more about this. So when you see, because we always think children often get marginalized because most grown-ups think that, these are too serious topics. Children don't know enough, things like that, in that stereotypical way. So I want to share with you some stuff where children show us that actually they can think, they can observe just as sharply, and that not all grown-ups also observe as sharply.
वो तो हमें लेने थे, क्योंकि अगर हम किसान ना होंगे, खेती ना होगी, तो खाना कहाँ से होगा? अगर खाना ना होगा तो हम कहाँ से होंगे? इसलिए हम वहां पर जुड़े। अब हम किसानों के साथ देंगे ना, जब वो जमीन बचेगी तो उनकी जमीन होगी, हम उनकी दिहाड़ी करेंगे, उनका काम करेंगे, तो ही हमें पैसा मिलेगा। हम मजदूर हैं, जब जमीन ना रहेगी तो हम रोज की दिहाड़ी कहाँ से कर? जैसे हम इकट्ठे होते थे, बातें करते थे, ये बहुत अच्छा लगता है। वहां पर गोलियां भी होती थी, यहाँ पर लड़कियां बाहर नहीं निकल सकती। वहां पर तो सभी लड़कियां खेलती थी।
So This was a girl from a village in Firozpur district in Punjab. There were two girls actually, and they were from an OBC community. They didn't really have land. Their families didn't really have land. And yet there was an understanding about why land was important, you know. And also that by being at the protest, they noticed what was different about being at the protest from everyday life. And this idea of how they were together, or that girls and women were doing things which they don't normally get a chance to do at the village. So these are all signs of how children are actually able to observe quite keenly, and that they are able to, if given a chance, to reflect on that, and to be able to actually engage in a dialogue that is enriching, not just for them, but actually also for the adult. I'll show you one more thing. This is from more recently. This is from one of the outreach workshops that I've just been doing. This was I'm not putting the audio on here, but I just wanted you to kind of share with you what was written in this workshop. These were slightly older children, the young people. Some of them were in fact going to enroll for college. But this, if you see that this was a session on equality and inequality, and if you see what is written, equality is when my sister and I get the same amount of money. Inequality is when brothers and sisters study in different schools. Equality is when all children get food in school. Inequality is when glass is found in the food given at school. Equality is when people from the neighborhood offer support during a fight. Inequality is when people from the neighborhood throw water and don't let children play. That tells you about how children experience this living together and the challenges that are present in everyday life, because we are not thinking enough about what does it mean to actually live together. Partition was a way of actually not living together, of separating, right? And our everyday life, through these lived experiences of children, show us that we are still grappling with this, that we are not sure what it means to live together and how we should think of the other person. And so I want to come back to the book and talk about these ideas and, the work that I've been doing with Hum Hindustani and with also some of the other work, The Incredible Child, which was with Afghan refugees. So it made me, the idea of, this idea of living together, this idea of belonging, it's kind of embedded in both of those projects. And so while I was writing Roop, I think that that also kind of strays into this. No, it is about this idea of like, how should partition was a cleaving, right? It was about separating. It was about removing yourself, removing someone from your body. But does it actually go away? And listening to seeing what's going on in the country and listening to people's lived experiences, we know that it doesn't go away. So for me, thinking about like, how do I end this story? What is it that happens that can, because one of the things as a writer for children is also that you want the stories to show some possibility, to show hope. It is important, I think, because children have their whole lives in front of them. And I don't think it's just for children. This is also for me. Like I say this very often, that I think that I'm privileged that I work with kids, because it is a way for me to cope with whatever that is going on outside, which seems just so full of despair, right? Because when you work with children, you get a sense of like how it is possible to actually run counter to what is going on the world stage. Yeah. And when I started to think then about like what could happen in this story about this girl and this kaleidoscope, I went back to all the stuff that I had read about partition. I started doing some research and like thinking of looking for, accounts by people who had been children at that time. And I was lucky enough to find Uma Chakravarti's work. She has an essay based on her research with child survivors of partition. And in that, I found the story of a little girl who had to cross the river. That was a Ravi they were crossing. And because the river was swollen, because it was monsoon, there were farriers who were taking people across. And this girl, she was scared, the way that Uma writes about it, and she reports the interview. And there were these tall Pathans who were working as farriers. And she chose the tallest Pathan there to take her across the river. And I thought, that's what I would like to do. That in that moment of fragmentation, in that moment of where this actually the Pathan represents that body which is being left behind, and yet there is a connection between them, and she chooses him to be able to take her to what is going to become her new home. And I think maybe this would be a good time for me. We are okay on time? Yeah, I think we're okay, right? I'll read you a small bit about the end, because I think while it is a sad story, for me, there is an element of possibility in the end, which I hope, I felt it, and I hope that others will feel it. I'm going to just read you more.
Just interrupting for a minute. Could we like maybe make this slide into a full screen perhaps? So
this, yeah, shall I try that?
So
yeah, can you see that?
That is visible, yes. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to read you a small bit. So what has happened is they have had to leave, and they've sort of, there's a truck that comes to take them, and then they arrive at this riverbed, and people are crossing the river, and her mother is holding the little baby, and the mother kind of like freezes in fear, I think. And she doesn't really know what to do, because her father has taken the baby and I think gone ahead, right? So I'm going to read you from that bit. I'm sorry. Oops. Oh, no. I just touched that and sorry, it just changed the slide. Just give me 1 second. It's not. Yeah. Okay. So they're at the river's edge. Papaji held out a hand for Bebe. Jaggi Chacha turned to take Roop from the Pathan. Shukriya Bhai, oh, I'm so sorry. Hang on. So sorry. Yeah. So Roop knew that there was no more time for play. She drew a breath, reached out a hand to the Pathan's sleeve, and said, "You are tall, you carry me across." The Pathan and Jaggi Chacha exchanged a look, and then he nodded. He lifted Roop with his large hands up to his shoulders. A whimper escaped from Roop's mouth. "It will be fine," he said. "Don't worry." Why do grown-ups say that? What is going to be fine? How do they know? Roop wondered. The water parted as the Pathan started wading in. Jaggi Chacha was just ahead of him, holding Bebe by the shoulders and pushing her forward. A baby cried somewhere in the dark. Voices hissed, asking for silence. Crickets chirped. The river flowed, lapped, splashed. Dark water, dark trees. The trees are watching 1, 2, 3, 4. Roop held on to her kaleidoscope with one hand and to the Pathan's shoulder with the other. He walked steadily as the water rose to his waist, chest, shoulders. Roop's legs dipped into the water. The Pathan held on firmly and kept telling her not to be scared. The breeze carried a prayer to Roop. It was Bebe reciting softly. "Aap haath de mujhe ubariye, maran kaal ka tras nivariye. With your hand, guard me, destroy my fear of death." Roop held herself rigidly on the Pathan's shoulders. The swishing water threatened to drown the kaleidoscope, so she raised her hands higher, and then they were across. Papaji held out a hand for Bebe. Jaggi Chacha turned to take Roop from the Pathan. "Shukriya Bhai, we will always remember your help." The Pathan muttered something as he gently brought Roop down from his shoulders and set her down on the ground. Roop looked up at him but could not speak. For a moment, It was as if Roop and the Pathan were in a slice of the kaleidoscope world, its edges made of scared, confused people. Red, blue, green, purple. The swirl of bodies walking through water continued. May Allah be with you, Bacha, the Pathan said. Roop's eyes were fixed on the Pathan's face, but still the words would not come. She became aware of her body, standing on the river's edge, her feet steady, her hands curled. She looked down at the kaleidoscope in her hand. Slowly, she raised it and put it in the Pathan's large hands. His eyes welled up as Roop felt her little hands being enveloped by the warmth of his hands. Rab Rakha, someone muttered. May God protect you. The Pathan raised the kaleidoscope to his lips in silent thanks. The glass bits inside shook and clinked, and Roop wondered what shapes they were creating. The Pathan walked back into the water, and Roop walked away from her beloved toy that would remain in a home which now seemed far, far away. Sometimes home can be as fragile as the glass inside a kaleidoscope. Split up with triangles, split up with circles, split up with lines that splinter the world. So, of course, it is sad. It is, there is a kind of, there is a gulf that is being created. Roop is having to leave, but she is leaving traces behind of herself. And I think she's also carrying traces away with her. She's carrying that memory of the Pathan who helps her actually to safety, to what is going to become her new home. And so, this for me, this idea that this is actually rooted in something that has actually happened, that it's not something which is just from my imagination, that too was an important thing, because it shows us that that possibility is always alive in the world. That possibility of being that person who helps, that possibility of being the person who is able to see that connection. And so at that Partition Museum event, Parvati asked me this question, which was actually it made me think. And she said, can there be an opposite of partition today? And looking at what is going on in the world, not just here in India, but like in many parts of the world, in Palestine, you think that how can there be? Can there be such a thing as the opposite of partition? And so, of course, my first answer is no. But then I think also about like the children that I meet, and I go back to some of what I listen when I interact with them. And I want to go back to that same Trilokpuri workshop where, those Muslim children had given us those experiences of theirs. And I want to just share with you what one of the children said. So this was a Hindu girl. And she told me, so when we were talking about all of this, the idea of equality and inequality, they had given me many examples about, like how in caste is such a big thing, and they are told that don't talk to, don't eat with people who are from the lower caste, don't eat with Muslims. So this girl, she told me that her parents had told her, don't eat with your Muslim classmates. And then she kind of paused, and then she looked at me and she said, but I do it. I still do it. And to me, that small little act, I think, that rebellion, that tiny little rebellion, to me, that is what I would like to think of as the opposite of partition today. Even when it looks so impossible and so difficult on the world stage, I want to hold on to those things. I want to hold on to that little act, because it's only when there are many of those little acts that perhaps, something bigger can come. And that is also, it gives me the sustenance to be able to continue, because otherwise, how do we live, when there is so much despair in the world? And so that is why I feel that this idea of like listening to children's experiences, to the idea of making place for children's voice is so important, is because it gives us the possibility of finding these little moments, which can then, that if as adults, we pay attention to that, it can change also the way that we are. The same girl, she said to me, so while we were talking about all of this, so one of we were wrapping up, and I said something about how, oh, so then the way that, to cope with all of this is that we should listen to each other, that we should pay attention to what is going on with others, and that other could be a stranger as well. And so she said to me, but we'll do that. We will listen to the padosi, but the padosi, the neighbor, he will not listen to us. And I thought, that's true. That happens. So I said to her, but do you think that's possible? It's possible that, no one asked him when he was a child to listen, or that if we don't practice this idea of listening, that maybe when we grow up to be the same age as that neighbor, maybe we will also forget what it means to listen. And I think we left it at that, and that's something that we took away, that we carry back with us to think about this idea of listening. And so I want to end this in the hope that you will also carry this idea of listening, and that it is that, I think, which I hope that in writing this book, I've been able to kind of draw upon all of these experiences with so many different kinds of children. And I hope that that is what has allowed me, like I have been that adult who listens and who then is able to put forth a narrative that, though sad, allows us to think that there is always a possibility, that a possibility is always alive for us to think about the action that we will do, that to be that adult who thinks about why we are acting the way that we are acting. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm happy to listen to questions.
And I was getting ready to listen to more. Like, what?
Yeah.
Oh no, I've got 3 notes. So, okay, we are now open to the question and answer session part of this talk. I'm personally feeling a bit overwhelmed, and reading Roop and The River Crossing always makes me cry a little. I mean, the first time I read it, I cried a lot. Today I did not cry as much, but I still cried. So I'm going to take a moment to sort of settle my own thoughts and feelings, and I will therefore ask the very first question that is in the chat from Sujata Patel. If anyone wishes to unmute your audio and video and ask Samina your question directly, you are most welcome to do so. Otherwise, do leave your questions and comments in the chat. Sujata says, thank you for this wonderful talk. I really enjoyed listening to you. I have a small query that partition also causes trauma that has transcended generations. The violence, displacement, and loss experienced during that time have left lasting scars on families and communities. What's your thoughts on this?
I absolutely agree. I think that it is something that is still living with us, even if we do not have a direct connection to it. What it is doing, its legacy continues to do things to the social fabric, which are resulting in the kinds of experiences that the children have shared with me. So I absolutely agree with you. And I think that is also what probably prompted Simran, my editor, to ask me if I would work on this book, and that I would think of writing something for children, because we need things to kind of make sense of reality of the world around us, and stories, of course, as you know, help us to do that. And so for children, I think making sense of that is, I mean, there are stories that many children, particularly in the North and in Bengal, are listening to in their families. And so to be able to have like a multiplicity of voices and a multiplicity of experiences that can then enable you to kind of make sense of it, I think that's important. So I do agree with you.
I have a follow-up question to that, actually, because something I've noticed in the course of my work is there is a lot of partition and freedom struggle related children's literature that is being written in the diaspora. Whereas, am I audible?
Yeah, something happened to your...
it says my internet connection is unstable.
Yeah.
That's going to happen. It was always going to be unstable story of life. No, so to go back to what I was saying, there a lot of partition and freedom struggle related literature is being written for children and young adults in the diaspora.
Yes.
On the other hand, in India, we do not really have much, as you said yourself at the beginning. We've got Doug Bill's Songs of Freedom, but that is from 2023 onwards. So, I mean, to what would you attribute this gap that exists within Indian publishing itself, as opposed to what we have among the Anglo-American diaspora? We've got The Night Diary, we've got a lot of Priya Kelkor's work. So when we've got that, then we've got
Also, I some stuff that has come out of I think the Bengali diaspora also, no? Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure, and I feel I don't know if I've thought enough about this to give a considered response, but I'm just going to like hazard a kind of guess. So, one, we have like, I think that children's literature, like in the early years of nation building, the early decades, it's this nation building, and we are trying to, it's a positive spin, no? Everything is like, it's a country that is come through, we are coming together, we are building. So that's not always a time to think back at something which is uncomfortable. So I did a project many years ago which was also looking at films of the CFSI of that period, and there too this idea of nation building is about like coming together, and different children of different castes and religions doing things together, urban people, children of urban families going to rural families. So I think it's this, that in the early years, it's about like not being able to look at something which runs counter to that narrative, because partition would need you to sort of make sense of also these uncomfortable things about this body that is India. And I think that in the last, like, we have been grappling with this idea of, the idea of Indianness, and the nationalist kind of approach. So how do we look at partition in a way that enables us to understand the complexity of being Indian without losing that unity in diversity? So, I mean, I'm just hazarding a guess, because I've not really thought enough about it, but I feel some of it is that, and it is I think, like, say, the Songs of Freedom series, or I think now in Indian children's literature, because many things have happened in the last 20 years that have pushed writers to, the publishers have made space, and writers have written narratives where these more complicated realities are given space. Nida Finds a Way is part of a series of books which are about all kinds of funny things, right? And yet there's something, there's a kind of a political context in it, which runs, which throws up questions about the conventional nationalist narrative. So I think that's like started to happen a little bit, but this context that we are living in, the political context, it's a hard one. So I think, like, for Doug Bill to have the Songs of Freedom series is a really big thing, to continue to put out books like that, or, for example, to put out a book like Zen, these are not easy things in this context. They require, I'm sure, a lot of legal kind of consultation and things like that. So I think that is probably one of the things, that how do you, like, this is an uncomfortable part, and how do you talk about it without, that, because I'm sure if there are narratives which are kind of, because that the government put up a partition museum also, like not this partition museum, but there's a partition exhibition and all that. So there is a certain way of looking at the partition which would be acceptable, I'm sure. But the complicatedness of it, this is not a context that I think is easy to put that kind of work out, I would guess.
I completely agree with you, and you've uh, actually clarified a lot of doubts and questions that I was finding myself asking over these last few years, especially these last few months, especially as we grapple with the idea of a nation and being Indian and what is Indian. So thank you for that. That was I wrote the entire thing down. I'm going to probably go back and listen to it many times over. Now, Sachandra Banerjee has raised her hand for a while, so we will go to Sachandra's question and then we will follow up with a lot of other questions that we've got. Sachandra also says in the chat, your work is incredible. Just want to thank you for what you're doing.
Thank
Yeah, I'll
you. Thank
just,
you so
yeah,
much.
it was such a pleasure listening to you, Samina. Thank you so much for what you're doing. It's wonderful to see that you're working directly with children, that you're interacting with children, and that you're gathering insights to understand their worldview instead of dismissing them. So that's amazing. But here's what I'm thinking. Children are hugely influenced by parents. And it really stood out when you said to me that, that little girl telling you that, हम तो सुनते हैं, but पड़ोसी नहीं सुनते. Now, maybe she's the one who may have observed this, but this is probably also a question she may have, put to the adults in her family, and and they may have said this, हम तो कर भी लेंगे, but वो हमारे जैसे थोड़ी ना है. So they may have said this. So I feel like it's very, very important to also kind of build a sort of awareness among adults. What is your take on that? I mean, what is your take on what could be done to sometimes knock some sense into adults and
So,
also to make them aware of, bodies of work like yours, and also to kind of help them help their children? Because often adults, I mean, they don't do it because they don't know to do it. It's not because they have malintentions, right from the get-go, but it's also because they just don't know any better. So so your take on that?
yeah, no, absolutely. I think that actually the real work needs to be done with adults, because it is adults that have brought the world to the state that we are in, right? And we are now, like, we want to just place the burden of fixing it on, the generations that are to come. But this question of, like, how to work with adults is a very hard one also, because you need to have, so for adults need to be open to this idea that actually we don't know. So that teacher in Trilopuri is obviously not yet open to that idea. And some of that comes from the kind of like training that she has had, the kind of education system, what we think teachers should be like. We think teachers are taught to be like, they should always have the answer. It cannot be that the teacher can say, I don't know, and can we discover something together? So there are actually, the way to work with adults is at many different layers. For me, the way that I am trying is that this, say, for example, the Hindustani project, one of the things that we have done and we are in the process of doing is working with teachers. We are creating, there's a, there was a grant with Indiana University School of Education. So there is some work, there's a paper that we have written that can reach out to educators, which is talking specifically about what is the importance of listening to children's voices and what are the political possibilities that lie in that. We are creating a zine that can be sort of more accessible and can be used by, middle grade teachers, maybe elementary school teachers in different parts of the world, because these are ideas, while Hindustani is located in India, but the ideas that it's talking about are kind of universal ideas, and there are variations of the same challenges in different parts of the world. So for me, these are the small things that I do, but it's a tiny little drop. So what needs to be done with adults is like manifold. I think that some of things that bookstores have been doing recently, like Anushka and I were once part of a conversation that a bookstore organized, Delhi based bookstore organized, which was just with parents actually, using, some two children's books that we have written to say, like, what is it, like, why is this important? How can adults be engaged in the same space as children with that same thing? So the idea of kind of, building adult-child solidarity, it has to be done at many different levels. People like you have to write, you have to put the word out to the kinds of audiences that you get academics, get policy making audiences also, policymakers need to change the way that they think. So this idea that we have that, oh, children, we need to think for children, we are all the time doing things on behalf, like, because we know this is what the ideal child, this is what the ideal citizen has to be, and we have to make them grow into that. We know that that's not necessarily true, because adults have been making policy for a long time and we are still in the mess that we are. And many adults don't know things. So we are all learning, adults, children, everybody. We all have experiences. And the question is how we make sense of those experiences. So to be able to build dialogue across many different kinds of platforms, that's important, This is a huge thing that I've said.
Thank you so much. This is amazing. I love the bookstore initiative. I wish that there was more of that. And you'd be surprised how many parents would be interested.
Yes, absolutely. Parents
Yeah,
don't know. It's not, parents want, like, of course, they tell their children this, no, that you should be good people. Which parent is going to say, no, you should be bad people? But at the same time, they'll do something that we may think of as not good, no? But the
I
child is seeing
agree.
that, and the child is
We
then this dissonance, which is the same dissonance which is in our textbook and the child's lived experience. So we have to make sense of that. No, the parent is not doing it necessarily as many parents are doing it in an
Yeah.
unconscious.
I also hear you when you say it's very complicated to work with adults because I mean there's a different kind of diversity of psyche and mentality that you're also dealing with because everybody is a byproduct of their history.
Yeah. And
And
it's a
yes,
little, they're more rigid. With
yep,
children, I
they
feel there
are.
is a way that we can, particularly, this group of middle school children, they are, they've not got even high school kids. It's harder. I was just in a workshop in DPS Patna, and the teacher there was telling me that, working with grade 10 and 11 is very hard because she says, I sometimes say some things and I can see on their faces like, oh, ma'am is like doing this. So that jadedness has crept in.
Okay, there are a lot of questions in the chat. It's so many. We can't keep track now, I think. There are so many. So Shonga asks, and I will actually add a question that I had from this one. It's a related question. Thank you so much for this resplendent session. Shonga, would you like to ask your question in person or would you prefer I read it?
I can read it out if it's okay.
You're welcome to read it out yourself if you want.
Okay, so hello, ma'am. Thank you so much for this respondent session. I'm truly glad I had the opportunity of attending it, and I found it. I am so sorry, my video is not working at the moment.
That's
I'm so
okay.
sorry. So while listening to you reading excerpts from the book, I was wondering if there is a significance behind the choosing of the colors red, blue, green, and purple. Because I personally find the usage of color to be particularly interesting and striking, especially in the context of children's literature, because children also oftentimes perceive the world through particular colors, and some of their experiences are also tied to colors. So, as a kaleidoscope is an amalgamation of colors, is there a significance behind you choosing these four colors? Thank you.
Thank you, Shanga, for your question. And I will just add to it before you answer, Samina. Is that, I mean, the colors are pastel crayons and they simultaneously look very aged and very childlike with the way the colors are all bleeding also one into the other. So, what was the illustration collaboration process like?
So I want to say that the illustration by Shivam, it's really, really beautiful work that he has done. And he I mean, did it in, I would say, I thought quite a short span of time. And it is, he's like, I mean, I think you have to look again and again and you'll discover like the details, things that he has done with the bird as a metaphor, which keeps coming back in different ways. He's done some very beautiful work. Um, so it's the collaboration. I mean, I don't see like this. I think it's just his work. We did meet many times and there was like feedback sessions, but I feel the things that I contributed to that are, like details. In the very first session, because he's so young, he had many questions about, like how how he should dress somebody and those kinds of things. Because he's so young, he had not actually seen much of partition films that have come before. So I told him, I said, have you seen Garam Hawa, have you seen Tamas? And he hadn't. And I just said to him that please, you must see that. You'll get a sense of like the visual kind of landscape. And he did that. He was very rigorous. He did that. And then when we came back, he kind of had done sort of like sketches of the characters. I did small, like we had contributions. I mean, both Simran was part of it, and also Samar, who was the art director on the project, and we would together we would think that, oh, is she looking too big? Is she looking too young? Things like that. Things about her clothes. What should the house look like the school, the house, these kinds of things. But many of these like wonderful details which he has, like the fragments, that the idea of like those little, there's a page in which I think you also held that up, where there is a box with things, the broken lock, the key, the broken chappal, things like that. These are all him. So I mean, it is really a like he has taken the text and this is he's made the text his own. So I don't think it's like collaborative in that way, that I have a part in the art. The art is his completely. The significance of red, blue, so the colors were important to me, because when you look inside the kaleidoscope, the colors are important. I actually, of course, I've played with the kaleidoscope many times before, but when I decided that it was going to be the kaleidoscope, actually I bought one, and then I was fiddling around and seeing things in it and all that. And then at the end of it, our art director Samar, he has actually, I have one really nice handmade kaleidoscope that he made for all of us. So I have that now. But I played with it to see, like, how does it, so this idea of the splitting, how can I like write about it, like the circles, the triangles, like, I didn't want to just do it out of like my memory of the kaleidoscope. And so when you look inside the kaleidoscope, the colors are really important. So I wanted to use colors. I don't think I was thinking of what you did just now, or thinking about how children look at the world through colors. I didn't think of that. That was not in my head, but I wanted to use the colors because the colors are so important in the kaleidoscope. And red, blue, green, of course, because just like primary colors. But I wanted this rhythm, red, blue. I wanted like that rhythm of four things because, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Isai, blah, blah, blah. Like I guess I knew somewhere that I would have that thing and I wanted a rhythm. And so it became purple, because you can get purple also by mixing colors. So it's not just the primary colors, but also you mix to get purple.
Oh, thank you so much. Like you could really like understand that poetic flow when you were reading out the excerpt. So I was really curious about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question.
So our next question is from Tripti. Tripti, if you would like to ask the question yourself, or I can read it. Here. Okay, I will read it. Thank you for confirming. What are your thoughts on the ways the partition of India construct and reinforce gendered violence? And how were girls, women's bodies, and identities uniquely targeted and politicized during this?
Gosh, there's so much work on this, much better than what I know and what I have done. There is such so much good work on this. I mean, Urvashi's work and Ritu Menon's work. So, of course, we know that it was a time where women suffered violence because their bodies became something to exercise power on, both by people outside of their community and also from within their community, in their families. This idea of the woman carrying the pride of the family, and so घर की इज्जत को हाथ नहीं लगना चाहिए kind of thing. So we know that. So I'm not really going to say much about it because I think I'm not the right person to answer this question. There are people who have really worked hard on this and done very seminal work on it.
Okay, Michael has written double rules. We agree, Michael, completely 100%. Molly Arbuthnot asks, I have been told that India is hungry for books far more than the West, UK, US, etc. Do you think this is true? Molly, would you like to unmute yourself perhaps, or if we can?
Hi,
Yeah.
Molly, nice to see you here.
I was just, it's only because because I write books, I'm kind of interested in where people are kind of gearing or where energy is. And I've been told a lot that kind of India and the East is very it's a good market for books at the moment. The West kind of is losing its love of literature.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think publishers would be better placed to answer this question. I hear stories of publishers struggling to sell. I hear stories of bookstores struggling to sell. But I do know that there are people reading. So I think it's a complicated story, complicated space. And I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer this. I think publishers and bookstores would be better placed to answer this. But yeah, I mean, I think seeing what children's publishing has done in the last couple of decades, there definitely seems to be some like shift in the way people are reading. But really, Molly, I don't think I can answer this very well.
Okay, so we'll move on to I think this will be the final question that we can take, and then we have one comment. But it's an important comment. So we'll take this question and then the final comment. Ahona Ghosh asks, and Ahona, if you don't mind, I'll just read the question. You're welcome to unmute yourself, of course. Thank you so much for the beautiful session. Now that I've been kind of able to control my tears, same. I'm wondering is there a reason behind the obsessive force that is wielded to preserve a wordsworthier notion of childhood? Because if children are kept in the dark about the world around them, especially with regard to events such as the partition, and I'll add with reference to Jamno Walks also about COVID, then when they gain the maturity to understand things, the realization of what they went through along with the memories might perhaps return with a vengeance and lead to an extreme sense of anxiety and alienation. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure some of this is true, but I think, like most things, I think the picture is complicated. I don't think it's only one thing. So I think sometimes it's done with malintent and sometimes it's done out of ignorance. That it can be done out of ignorance and can lead us to a position where, you know, this anxiety and alienation arise. Of course, that happens. So I think, yes, sure, there might be some of this, but I think it's probably many things and many different impulses, many different approaches as to why children are kept in the dark or why we don't talk enough.
So we don't have any more questions, or we can't. We're not in a position to take any more questions. We are fairly over time, but we have a comment from Erica Taraporwala. Erica, she says, "No question, thank you. I am sure many are in tears like me. This is fairly high up in the chat list. I also want to share that my dad was around 17 or so at the time of partition, and the family moved to West Bengal, Kolkata, around partition. And he was part of a group of young people who helped Muslim families escape to the other side. I think they took the women and children through segments from where someone else would take over every early dawn till they reached the border over a few days. Equally, there were people on the other side helping Hindus to come over to this side. Thank you so much for sharing your family story, Erica, and for
You know,
really.
I'm sorry, Ritika, I'm interrupting you. This just made me think. So the session at the Partition Museum, we began, Parvati Sharma and I, she shared a story about her great-grandfather who was actually, he used to run a shop, and he had one of his customers had been uh, a Muslim person. He didn't know what they were, and he had come in to return a flask because he said it was not good or it wasn't working well or something. And this gentleman, Parvati's great grandfather, his one motto was, "The customer is always right." And so he took the flask and he returned it, and he forgot all about it. And then, of course, partition happened and the trouble started. And one day he was on the street and there was a mob, and he was saved by this man who remembered him because he was a Muslim police officer. So she shared that story. And I had a story about my great grandfather who was traveling, actually going to Kashmir, and the train was going through Jalandhar. And he I think it stopped, and there was like, they were not sure what was happening, and he and a few other people got off, and then there was this mob that came, but there was an army officer who was Sikh, and he was saved by that person, because then that Sikh army officer took them on a bus, on a truck, one of those army trucks, and took them to wherever that they could return from. So we both began, and there were these two stories, you know. So it's important to remember that this too happened, and in the way that Pathan helped that little girl, the girl in Uma's research.
Thank you so much, Samina, for being here today and for sharing these stories with us, because I think over the last few years, especially in India, uh, commemorating and remembering all the people who fought for freedom, who fought to get us to this place, it's become something of a PR exercise. And we tend to forget exactly how much pain and how much trauma went behind it. So this has been, I'm going to have a private cry later on. This has been very overwhelming, and it's been glorious to have you with us today. And it's been wonderful to have all our attendees, everybody who asked such fantastic questions. I wish your talk was longer. I really, really wish your talk was longer.
Oh dear.
Talk. And,
Oh dear.
for those who couldn't attend, of course, for various reasons, we will have it up on our YouTube soon. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending ACLiSA's talk. Our next talk will be by Kamyani Kumar, who will be talking about Kashmir and children's literature. In September, we will be sharing the details soon. And Kamyani also has a blog post out soon on our ACLiSA website on the Gujarat riots and children's literature. So do keep an eye out on our website for all of these new things that are happening in the next few months on ACLiSA, and we will see you again soon next month.
May I make one small request, please?
Sure.
Could you possibly send me these questions and comments?
Absolutely, absolutely. I will send them to you.
I will share them with the editor.
Sure. We will send them all to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for asking me to do this. It made me think, and I'm always happy for that. And also thank you so much, because it gives me a chance to see, like, and to know that there is a world of people who are interested, and so many exciting things are happening.
Jamlo was there was a cultural shift with Jamlo, because I mean, suddenly academics were looking at Indian picture books in a whole new light, and policymakers, parents, educators, booksellers, everybody was suddenly reading Indian picture books. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm sure Roop and the River Crossing